Marshall was right when he said there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Yes, the idea of freedom, liberty, and justice for all. Yes, that was the idea, but I declare that now is the time. And if America is going to have a chance at living out the true meaning of its creed, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, then we cannot afford for this nation or its leaders to have selective ambition.
Welcome back to the Policy Lowdown, the podcast from the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, offering straight talk on the policy choices that shape Maryland communities. I'm your host, Kevin Slayton. We've had several episodes about Maryland's budget and the budget process. What we haven't talked as much about are some of the unique ways that the state manages its finances outside of the budget approval process. While many states elect a treasurer, Maryland is unique in having an elected comptroller, which is a slightly different position that today's guest often describes as being the state's chief financial officer. Along with the governor and the treasurer, who are elected by the legislature rather than the voters, the comptroller also serves on the Board of Public Works, overseeing major contracts and other budget adjustments that take place throughout the budget year. I'm very excited today to welcome our guest and to have her discuss her many important roles. Brooke Lierman. She is the 34th Comptroller of Maryland, and might I add, she is the first sister woman to be elected to that role. This is the season of the sisters. Before that, she served 2 terms in the House of Delegates representing Baltimore City's 46th district. And then she also began her career as a civil rights attorney. Comptroller Lierman, welcome to the show.
It is great to be here. It's always wonderful to see you. Thank you for doing this podcast, and thanks for inviting me on today.
Thank you. I gave the highlights of your bio. Can you share a bit more about your background and what drew you to the public service industry in general, and in particular, what made you want to serve as the comptroller?
Well, big secret, I did not dream of becoming comptroller my entire life. If I had, I might be a little worried about me. I don't even think I knew there was a Maryland comptroller when I was in high school in Montgomery County Public Schools. I was born in D.C., raised in Bethesda in Montgomery County. Went off to college at Dartmouth. Didn't go to law school right away, though. For several years, I worked in different roles. I worked at and I was at AmeriCorps Vista. Some friends of mine and I and others had started this mentoring program in college where we worked with kids who lived in a public housing development near our college. And we called it the DREAM program. And then we turned it into a nonprofit after college. And I was the first development director there and loved it and had a great experience. I also got sucked into a few campaigns. So I worked for a man named Paul Wellstone, who was a U.S. Senator from Minnesota. And I'd seen him sort of speaking and doing amazing things in the progressive world when I was in high school. Just sort of paid attention and then drove out to Minnesota and was like, I want to work for this guy. He's amazing. And so had an incredible time working on his Senate campaign. Tragically, he and his wife and daughter and several of my fellow campaign staff all died in a plane crash 10 days before the election in 2002. I worked for Howard Dean, if you remember Howard Dean, on his campaign, and then Kerry Edwards. But I realized the higher up I got in campaign world, I didn't get to talk to voters and real people anymore. I only talked to consultants. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. So I went and worked at a think tank, sort of like that, but realized what I really wanted to do was work with people. And so I went to law school. And I was the first lawyer in my family. And I got a federal clerkship, which brought me to Baltimore, and really found a home here. And I have to say, had learned a lot, was very humbled by what I did not know when I arrived to Baltimore. One of my first day on the job, trying to get to my clerkship, I went to take the bus from Fells Point, where I lived, the number 10 that ran down Eastern Ave back then, to the federal courthouse, and it didn't come. And so I ran home and I said, Ab, you got to take me. My husband was like, you got to take me to work. And I realized sort of after trying to take the bus many times and being frustrated by it and sort of that our public transit system did not do what it needed to do for most people. And I was lucky because I could walk to work or bike to work or drive to work. But when I started educating myself, I realized that many Baltimoreans did not have that option. A third of Baltimore didn't have access to a car. I started checking out our schools in Baltimore and was really saddened, but also angered by the condition of many of the schools that I saw versus the schools that I had grown up around in Montgomery County. Sort of thought, like, how is this the same state? Like, how are we okay with this disparity? And really just started understanding the important role that the state played in Baltimore, and the role of state government in our daily lives, right? I'd grown up around the federal government and hadn't paid as much attention to the state. But the more that I saw in Baltimore, the more I realized that actually, for me, it was state government that could play a role in ensuring that people could reach their full potential, that communities could grow and thrive. And so I served on my community association. I served on the board of CPHA and some other entities, and eventually decided, you know what, I think I'm going to throw my head in the ring and run for state delegate. And I talked to a lot of people, and they said, go for it. So I'm not everybody, but most people. And rest is history, I guess.
Well, I'm excited that you decided to run. I imagine there are a lot of folks who've had career changes based on missing buses.
Yeah. You know what? It is interesting to have that as an origin story. And I will tell you now, years later, 10 years later, I'm still working and fighting for more funding for public transit for MTA in the Baltimore region. We still need it, right? We still need to see that investment. And for 8 years of the Hogan administration, it was just, we got scraps, right? And so, I was a delegate for 8 years, and then learned really while I was a delegate from Baltimore City the importance of the role of comptroller, but also, like, I looked at what the comptroller's office did and thought, I think it should be doing more, like more for people and more for communities. And so I threw my hat in the ring.
That's an excellent transition. We talked a bit about what the comptroller does a little bit, but why do you think this role is important to the state government, sort of how it runs? And what should Marylanders know about what your office specifically does? In particular, are there benefits to this being an independent elected position as opposed to being appointed as it is in other states?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I like to think about the Office of the Comptroller in 3 parts. First, it's good to know, actually even before that, it's good to know what the Constitution tells us, right? The Constitution says the Comptroller, it has general superintendence of the fiscal affairs of the state of Maryland. So it's a really a broad but also narrow lane in some ways. It's a really unique position in all of American government. There is no other statewide elected official with my job duties. Maryland likes to be unique. We like to be different. I'm a bit of a unicorn here. But so the 3 things the comptroller does. First, I'm like the state's elected CFO, right? We balance the books. We pay all state employees. We see every dollar in and every dollar out. Second, as comptroller, I act as an independent voice or watchdog that works to make sure Marylanders are getting the best value for their dollars. That means I do that in a number of ways, including by sitting on many boards. The Board of Public Works, the State Retirement and Pension Board, I'm now on the Commission on Climate Change, the Maryland, you give me 3 or 4 letters and I'll give you an acronym for a board that I stand on, basically, sit on. And then third, I act as the state's revenue administrator, which is the fancy way of saying I'm the state's tax collector. But I'm also the state's tax refunder, of course. So we collect taxes and issue refunds, and we implement the tax policy. And happy to talk more about what we're doing, to make sure we're doing that in an equitable way later on as well. But those are the 3 big things that are really the building blocks of the role of comptroller. And of course, every comptroller then decides what they're going to build, right, with those building blocks. And so we are doing things and reimagining what we can build in a way that really ensures that we're partnering to build a state that's more equitable, more resilient, and more prosperous so that every Marylander can reach their full potential. That is our vision statement for what we build to make sure we're working with Marylanders every day.
And the world's a much different place today.
It is.
Than it was even 10 years ago.
Totally.
There's a unique setup among states that Maryland has, which is the Board of Public Works. 3
yes.
people. You're one of those.
One of
them. It's a lot of power. You're one of those 3. Can you talk a bit more about what that board does? It's a very powerful board in our state.
It is.
And do you think there are benefits to this system rather than just having contracts that go through their respective state agencies,
Right.
they have to come by and pay a visit to you all first.
They do. And agency secretaries have a love-hate relationship with us. No. Look, I think that this is the best system, right? The Board of Public Works is the governor, the treasurer, and the comptroller. Now, the governor oversees all the agencies, of course, which are the agencies that are bringing most of the contracts to the BPW. The treasurer is appointed, as you said, by the General Assembly. And so the comptroller, I act as really an independent voice for the people of Maryland. And I take that role very seriously. We approve or monitor about sometimes over $400 million in state contracts a month. The Board of Public Works approves almost every state contract over $200,000, in addition to approving every grant to a nonprofit, loans to nonprofits, tax credits for housing, wetlands licenses, like a whole bevy of things that, sales of state land, it all goes through the Board of Public Works. And I'm very focused on transparency in government. I think it's really important that there's no reason to hide the ball. Like, we want to be transparent. We want people to know how their government is working. I think government works better when we're more transparent. And so that's one of the real, I think, linchpins of the importance of the Board of Public Works, is that people can see what is coming, what is being approved, what are, one of the things that we are focused on is increasing the amount of dollars that go to minority business enterprises, our MBEs, making sure that Maryland businesses are benefiting from these contracts. That's a focus of mine, looking at the climate resilience of contracts. So the BPW is the place where all of that can happen, and I'm very focused on making sure that it does. In fact, we're working now on building out a dashboard to allow the public greater access to see what is coming before the board as well.
Do you ever feel the pressure of being sort of like the voice of the people?
Yeah, I do. I feel it's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
We have, I have amazing team that works on BPW matters. And look, it's a full-time job, right? I have 2.5 people basically that do nothing but sort of examine everything that comes through. I was looking through next week's agenda yesterday afternoon, already sent them an email flagging a few things that I said, hey, we got to go to the agencies and ask about these contracts. What is going on here? We make sure we talk to the agencies before the meeting so we can say, we're not okay with this, or like, we need a lot more explanation about this, or why aren't you meeting your MBE goal here? I mean, just last week at a meeting, I highlighted to SHA that they were basing their MBEs on basically false. They didn't need to be creating the challenges for MBEs to access the work that they were doing, and they were just doing it geographically. But, you should be able to have access to the same MBEs, whether you're in Howard County or Baltimore County. Like, these are jurisdictions that touch each other, right? And so was able to say, hey, guys, let's do better. So, yeah, I feel it's a big responsibility. Yeah.
I can sense that. You mentioned the Board of Public Works also has the authority to make cuts.
They do. Yes, they do. I didn't mention that.
And
yes.
cuts up to 25%. That's a huge portion of the budget.
Yep.
This has come up a couple of times in recent years. Most recent in 2020, while you were still serving in the legislature, Governor Hogan proposed pretty significant cuts at a time when there was a lot of economic uncertainty that was due to the pandemic. And this past July, Governor Moore proposed nearly an additional $150 million in cuts to the current budget, which the board approved unanimously. Can you share a bit about your thought process and why you felt it was necessary to take that step? And do you have any concerns about the impact of any of those cuts could ultimately have?
Sure, great question. So I think first it's important to level set about the importance of BPW's ability to make cuts. We have a part-time legislature. It meets from January to April. And when they leave in April, their one constitutional mandate is to pass a balanced budget, which of course they do every year. But turns out things happen outside of January to April. And so it's really important that the BPW be able to approve budget reductions they're proposed by the governor, right? The governor brings proposed budget reductions, and then we examine them and walk through them. When the Secretary of Budget and Management and the governor first brought the idea of this to us, it was before they had not even identified where the cuts were going to come from, but they simply said, we are experiencing extreme budget crunch, and because of two of our programs that are doing much better than expected. And so they're way oversubscribed. And that was our Child Care Scholarship Program and Medicaid. Our Child Care Scholarship Program is essential to helping families, low-income working families, access the child care that they need so that they can go to work. If they can't go to work, they can't make money, and our economy slows down because our economy, we have such a low unemployment rate, we are hurting for more workers. We need more workers. Medicaid, obviously, likewise, essential that our population has access to Medicaid. It's a lot cheaper to go to have somebody insured through Medicaid and go to their primary care physician than to have them end up in the emergency room, right? It's better for the system and better for that person's health. So there was a need to make sure that we could fully fund the Child Care Scholarship Program and Medicaid for these vulnerable Marylanders. Then the plan was, okay, bring us some ideas of where you'd cut. And that's what they did. And look, we winnowed down a lot. There were more cuts. I think originally they would tell you that too, but there was a lot of winnowing and a lot of narrowing to be strategic. Almost everything that was cut was something that had been increased during the General Assembly. And so it could be cut because they would just basically exist at their level funding from the previous year. Or for us, even my agency, we got cut. So we delayed hiring by 6 months of much needed staff. So all of our PINs, our new positions, were frozen until January 1st. So we have not hired any of those people that we were anticipating hiring in July. We can't hire them till after January 1st, and that saves hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I do think that these collective sacrifices allow the state to increase spending on our healthcare and childcare programs, and it was important to do that. Also important to just demonstrate, I think, that we have the fiscal and financial ability to be financially, to make strong financial decisions. Important for us to demonstrate that to the state, to bond rating agencies, to ourselves, just important to make sure that we can think strategically and make tough decisions.
Shifting topics a bit. One of the things you've been grappling with since you took office is the age of the technology that powers the state's financial systems. Again,
yes.
It's a lot different place than it was even 10 years ago.
Yep.
And so bringing those systems into the 21st century has been a huge project. How are things going, and what do you see as some of the ways that this updated technology can ultimately improve the experience of everyday Marylanders who encounter your office?
Yes, it's a great question. And I'll answer it sort of so we have 3 core priorities in our agency. And improving our technology is fundamental to meeting each of those core priorities. One is to make government work better. We cannot make government work better if we are operating in COBOL, right, on a mainframe.
I was going to ask, how bad was it?
COBOL. I have employees on green screens, right? They're not using a mouse. They're using a function key to get around. It's crazy. And these are systems that are past the end of their useful life, right? And we don't have people who can maintain them. So it's just essential for the preservation of the state and our finances that we get out of these systems. And there are a lot of them. So just to make sure government works better, essential. So a couple systems I'll mention. One, our tax processing system. We're moving from an old COBOL-based system called SMART, very ironic, to a new system called Maryland Tax Connect. We moved all our businesses to Maryland Tax Connect this past February. And in 2026, we'll be moving all of our individual and personal taxes to Maryland Tax Connect as well. People have a lot more power to be able to look in, see what's going on, understand their account. It'll be more like, you're in a bank account, you can see all the transactions. It'll be more like that. So for businesses now, we have over 145,000 businesses already registered and using Maryland Tax Connect, and we're about to we're almost to 1 million returns filed. So since February, so it's going. We're moving forward. The second system is making sure that we are building out a general accounting system for the state that adds transparency and usability for all users. So this really goes to one of our second priority, which is to ensure the resources of our office create opportunity for and positively impact Maryland families, businesses, nonprofits. Right now, if you're a nonprofit and you get a grant from the state, or you're a business or an MBE and you're working as a sub on a job, there is no transparency into payments. You don't know when your money's coming. You don't know who's getting paid. You don't know what you have to upload. So we want to make sure we are going to bring in a whole new accounting system that will allow for that level of transparency. And then finally, we're building a whole new website to increase our availability as well. And that's our third priority, is to ensure Maryland's well-positioned for responsible long-term economic growth and success, and to make sure that we're measuring that and that people have a way to use our systems easily. We've got to make sure that we're modernizing each and every day.
All those sounds like huge undertakings.
They are big undertakings.
The transfer of that type of information, but I
Yep.
imagine it's going to be extremely helpful to those small businesses that are dependent on those checks and sort of knowing when they're coming in.
That's the goal. Is you don't modernize just for modernization's sake. You do it to make government work better for everybody.
You have to use it. One of the ways technology will be benefiting Marylanders next year is that we will be among the states that can file our federal taxes using the new direct file program.
Yes, very
and
exciting.
this has the potential to benefit a lot of Marylanders, but particularly low-income households.
Yep.
Who all too often are missing out on the really powerful tax credits like the EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit, and Child Tax Credit that help reduce poverty in the state and as well as around the country. About 20 to 25% of people who are eligible, we found out, miss out on the EITC each year. That means money they don't collect. What do you want Marylanders to know about Direct File, this new program, and what other tools is your office using to ensure that more people, particularly those who are on the margins, get the tax credit that they're eligible for?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for bringing this up, because this is also part of our modernization effort, right? Direct File Maryland is excited to be joining the IRS Direct File program in 2025. We think this will allow an estimated 870,000 Marylanders to file their state and federal tax returns online for free, no cost, through one online system, Direct File. It's an alternative to the sort of pricier online programs like a TurboTax or something, or to paying a tax professional. It's ideal for Maryland residents who receive most of their income through W-2 employment, or who take the standard deduction, who want to claim credits, as you said, like the EITC or Child Independent Tax Credits. So Direct File is a program that was funded by the federal government. It's a mobile-first program, so you'll be able to do it even on your mobile device. And you'll be able to, it's people who are eligible will be able to account for pension and annuity income, child independent care credits, savers credit, student loan deductions, and other things like that. You'll be able to reach it. We'll have links to it on our website explaining who's eligible, how to get to it, and you'll first fill out your federal tax returns, and then it'll push that data through to the state tax return as well. So you only have to enter the information once, and then you'll be able to file it online. And we have such high hopes. Like, I really think that this could be a game changer for many, many Marylanders. A lot of some Marylanders don't file their tax returns, even though they've been paying taxes through their W-2. They might choose not to file and realize it's hard, it's expensive. They might feel sort of scared to file. They're not sure what's going to happen, but many of those folks could be getting money back, right? Because they qualify for the EITC or child tax credit. So we're hoping that this just lowers or removes a barrier so that people will feel confident filing their tax returns.
I hope so. I know there's a large number of folks who are just afraid of technology.
Yeah.
And so my wife picks with me all the time because I go to school every other week on YouTube. So would there be something available to folks to sort of, who are afraid of that, to say this is how you use it?
Great question. Yes, we're going to be doing educational videos that we'll link to on our website. We'll put stuff on social media. We are also embarking on a big new campaign to understand who's not claiming the EITC and the child tax credit and why, so that then we can do additional outreach in the coming years to help close that gap. So starting next July, we actually have funding in the budget from a bill that we passed last year to do marketing and direct outreach to Marylanders around the EITC and child tax credit. So we're working with the Urban Institute and Casey Foundation right now on trying to identify strategies and understanding why people don't claim it so that we can go to those folks and encourage them to file and claim it. But yes, we have a ton of social media. We're doing roundtables around the state and want to keep up on this.
That's outstanding. Finally, I want to spend the last few minutes talking about the state's economy.
Yes.
At the beginning of the year, your office released its first ever State of the Economy report. What are some of the challenges and opportunities you see facing Maryland right now? And do you see a role for your office in working with the Moore administration and the legislature on policies that will ultimately strengthen the economy and expand opportunity for working Marylanders?
Great question. So yes, we realized when I first took office that we did not know why Maryland's economy was not growing at the same rate as other states, which translated to us meant lower revenues, right? We are not increasing our revenues into the state, our taxes, right, at the same rate as other states. And so we undertook a 6-month study. We went around the state and talked to business leaders, economic development leaders. We had individual conversations and roundtables, took all of that data along with our own data, crunched it together, and produced this report on the state of Maryland's economy. First time it's ever been done. And we did it in time for the General Assembly session last year, so the General Assembly would have it. The governor cited it in his State of the State address. And we found that we have a real labor force challenge, both because of population. This labor shortage is both because of population decline, but also because folks have opted out sometimes, perhaps for different reasons. And so this labor shortage translates to last year there were nearly 3 job openings available for every 1 job seeker, whereas nationally it was 1.5 job openings for every 1 job seeker. So just a lot more constraints in Maryland's labor market. And so there are a couple of things that came out of the report that we wanted to highlight, and we're doing that now. So the first is the importance of immigration, international immigration to Maryland's economy. We put out a whole separate report last spring all about the importance of international immigration because we felt like it was important to highlight that, especially given the negative national tones around international immigration. But this is a piece of the population that is helping us, whether it's nurses and healthcare staff or home healthcare aides or scientists at NIH or workers on the Key Bridge, right? Mm-hmm. Our international community that is settling in Maryland, we have about 17% of our population is internationally born, 20% of our labor force. So they are working at a higher percentage than our native-born population. So there was international immigration. The second piece we are digging in on is childcare, because we saw in the report that women left the workforce at double the rate as the national rate. And so we lost about 180,000 workers during the pandemic from Maryland's workforce that did not return. 100,000 of those workers were women. And when we started digging into the data on childcare, we know that it is incredibly expensive. And it so happens that Maryland has had one of the worst recoveries in the nation in terms of childcare programs coming back online after the pandemic. So we are taking a closer look at this issue in collaboration with the State Department of Labor. We're a few weeks away from issuing a follow-up report that will explain the importance of childcare to our workforce and to our economy, but also highlight some of the challenges that our childcare sector has found and is seeing. Because if we can't get the childcare system right, it means that parents will never work at their full employment levels because they just can't afford to. It's not a smart financial decision.
Legislation?
So no, our role is really, I think, to issue is to get the data out, right? We have the data, we'll crunch the numbers, we'll put it into a way that's digestible, which is a first for this agency, like issuing these reports. But I'm not a policymaker, right? We elect great county council members and delegates and senators and a governor to be our policymakers. So we issue this report, and then we say, here, team, here's what we found. Do with it what you will.
Question there.
Yeah.
Because of your experience as a legislature.
Yeah.
They get so many reports.
Yep.
How do you ensure
that they're looking at ours?
That they pay attention.
It's a good question. I think how we do it is to make sure it's relevant, digestible, and actionable, right? So we say, okay, I know that childcare is an issue that is really relevant to our economy. We know that the speaker and others have been working on this issue for many years. They don't have any government data to share with them. So even though others, like nonprofits and other groups, may issue reports, there's no other agencies issuing reports about this. So we're saying, look, this is government data that we are sharing with you about the impact that we believe is highlighting the challenges so that you can have those facts and base your policy decisions off of those facts. I mean, we can't force them to do that, but we want to at least make sure the data's there. And then the final issue that I will just briefly address that we talked about in the report, we talked about a lot more in the report, but is housing affordability. Housing is just so huge. And we have seen in Maryland population decline, both because we have an aging population and lowering birth rate, but also because we're seeing folks moving from high cost of living states to lower cost of living states. That's a national trend. But we are losing people in Maryland and not getting people to come to Maryland because of the high cost of living. And the biggest piece of cost of living is housing. And so we have been working, certainly a big supporter of Secretary Day and the work that DHCD is doing, but we're working to think through how to do additional reporting on how essential it is to make sure we're getting the housing right and what we can do around it as well. So,
outstanding.
Yeah.
Look how fast time goes by.
That was fast, yeah.
That's it for today's episode. I want to thank Comptroller Lierman for taking the time out of your very, very busy schedule to sit down with us today. A special shout out to your staff, Robin. Thank you, Robin, for helping us pull this off. I hope you're able to come back and join us again sometime. I know the session's breathing down your neck.
Yeah, and can I put a plug in?
Sure.
Hope folks will visit our website. It's marylandtaxes.gov. You can check out all our research reports at marylandtaxes.gov/research to find, check out any of those reports. That's where it all gets put. We're going to be releasing a brand new website in the new year, so come back and visit us there as well.
Outstanding.
Thanks.
You can also find our podcast archives and resources from this episode at mdeconomy.org/policy-lowdown. And while you're there, you can sign up for our email list or support the Policy Lowdown by making a donation to the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. You can also find the Maryland Center on Economic Policy at MD Economy on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram, and MD Economic Policy on Facebook. See you next time.
Those that would stand up, call our nation back toward justice and righteousness are often bashed or labeled as socialist and unpatriotic.